Our next speaker is Tiffany Morrison. She's a political geographer concerned with the design of complex and multi-scalar environmental governance regimes in America, Australia, and Asia. She's a social science research leader in the ARC Centre of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies. And her name, she tells me, is translated as Manifestation of God. Please explain.
So the story I'm going to tell you today is probably going to make you feel even more seasick than the seasickness that David felt coming out here in the first place. And it's a story about reef governance, and in particular the governance of the Great Barrier Reef and whether that governance is under siege. So the governance of the Great Barrier Reef, as we know it today, started in 1975 with the development of the original Act to govern the reef and the authority to manage the reef. And it has evolved over that time, since 1975, through different phases of institutional strengthening and development, which incorporate not just that original Act and the agency, but a range of other different acts and agencies at different levels in Australia to govern different aspects of the reef and the activities on the land and in the water that impact on the reef. And this governance regime, until about 2005, was internationally celebrated around the world as one of the best examples of ecosystem-based management, and in fact has been awarded at least 19 prizes, not just for scientific and biological purposes, but also for good planning and good governance. But by 2015, the story has changed. There's a variety of reports that you may have heard of just flicking through the newspaper or listening to the news or watching the TV, coming out both in the media and in scientific commentary that the reef is in danger. But at the same time, governments at different levels and government agencies have been responding by saying that actually there is a sound system of governance, stakeholder engagement and other management processes in place. That a strong foundation of existing protection and management of the property remains firmly in place and continues to be built upon. These two reports came out in the last 12 months. And another one that also came out in the last year, which says that combined, the body of law comprehensively protects the Great Barrier Reef, and further that governments are regularly reviewing and updating legislation to ensure that new threats and issues are efficiently and effectively addressed as they arise. So where do I fit in? I'm a political geographer. I study how political decisions play out in space and at different scales. And what I like to do is trawl through lots of qualitative evidence, do lots of interviews, look at probity reports, annual reports, pieces of law, legislative amendments, you name it, talk to all of the key informants and the people involved, do a bit of participant observation to find out what's really going on with this story. Is the governance of the reef in trouble, or is it intact and adequate as the government reports are claiming? And what I found is that while it is tempting to blame certain people, such as this person, it won't go away, or this person, or even this person, that's the Federal Environment Minister. It's actually a story that's been going on for a lot longer, since at least 2004, when certain government reforms in an underhand and even perhaps accidental way started to dismantle the very complex and celebrated regime that had been developed to manage the reef and protect the reef. So that these more subtle processes started dating back to about 2004, but progressively got worse and much more blatant and obvious in the last couple of years, as you may be aware, which explains some of the heightened media activity and science commentary. So how can we explain this? Well, the 2004 rezoning of the reef, which was essentially the point in time when scientists and governance experts and planners and even the regional community and the national community was celebrating the original realisation of the Act of the Great Barrier Reef Management Act. This coincided with the beginning of the resource boom in Queensland, which saw an increase in resource production, an increase in population in the state. Those resources that weren't extracted in the Great Barrier Reef catchment were quite often transported through it. And then that was followed by the global financial crisis in 2008, which saw one of the worst budget deficits in recent history. And then the end of the mining boom in 2012, which coincided with the election of Conservative governments at both the state and the federal levels. And the increase of the industry lobbies to cut back regulation in order to decrease their operating costs through decreasing compliance costs. And as a result, what we've seen is an increase in controversial approvals in the reef, multiple reports demonstrating that the reef is in decline, and the World Heritage Committee, in fact, deciding this year whether to list the reef as in danger or not. The road ahead. So the last year, since the last 9 months have been a bumpy ride. We saw the Queensland Government introduce a port strategy to try and deal with ports on a statewide level rather than port by port. We saw the first term Newman government in Queensland thrown out and replaced with another government. We saw the introduction, the reef was a deciding election issue in that election. We saw a new minister for the reef, which has never happened in Queensland before, installed. And we've just seen a replacement of our Prime Minister. 2016 to 2017, there's more seasickness ahead. So 2017, the federal government is required to report back to the World Heritage Committee on how they've managed to address the issues that were raised leading up to the potential in danger listing. And in the meantime, we've got a federal election where the reef, in a report that was produced by some consultants advising the federal government last week, identified the reef as one of the top 5 national issues to be considered in the federal election, right up there with refugees, terrorism, budgets, and so forth. So the forecast is more choppiness ahead. Thank you.